You're kidding me. I accidentally borrowed the wrong car of a guy who stole some liquor earlier today?
The car you stole belongs to the Reverend Malcolm Dickinson. He is the minister of the Presbyterian Church here in Freiburg.
Are you sure he's a minister? One of my best friends makes his living as a completely phony minister. For $2, I can make you a minister. Some guys steal your money, but these guys, they steal your heart.
A former gangster tries to adjust to life in the suburbs when he joins the Witness Protection Program. This week, special guest Samantha Noah returns to discuss expensive hot dogs, the dangers of garbage disposals, and how the Wet Bandits always seem to just walk into other people's houses. Then we find out if My Blue Heaven stands the test of time.
It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? James says gladiator with a glutton. Alan says as a father, blah, blah. It's the test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today? Test of time, James and Alan have their say. Do the movies you love still hold up today?
Hey everybody, it's me, James Brief, with the Test of Time podcast. How you doing?
Doing okay, but a little concerned about you. Did you hit your head there, James?
No, I'm having a good time with this, comedic wise guy accent, the same way that Steve Martin did in today's film, My Blue Heaven.
Oh, right. Well, I should say my name is Alan Noah, and we are joined for the second consecutive week by my sister, Sam. Hello.
Hi, everybody. How are you?
Well, they can't answer you because it's a podcast. So, I don't know. Maybe they are. Maybe they're sitting in their car and being like, good, thank you, Sam. Did I call you Samantha last time?
I think you did, which is unusual. Are you mad at me?
Oh, no. Samantha Noah is your full name.
It is. It's my government.
I usually call you Sam. The kids call you Aunt Sammy, but for our purposes.
Professional reasons.
Yeah, so for podcasting reasons, we will call you Sam. So last week we spoke about Goodfellas, and today we're talking about My Blue Heaven, and there is a connection between these two movies. I believe we mentioned it in our Harold and Kumar Go to White Castle episode. How it came up then, I'm not sure. But in case people aren't familiar with the connection between these two movies, why don't you give us like the rundown, Sam?
Okay, so the deal is Wise Guy was a book written by Nicholas Pileggi. And he did extensive interviews with Henry Hill and with a couple other people to try and get it right. But it was mostly Henry Hill's book, which is why Goodfellas is Henry Hill's movie. Henry Hill had a really big mouth. He liked to talk a lot. And even after he went into Witness Protection Program, he continued to run his mouth. The funny piece is that Nicholas Pileggi was married to Nora Ephron until she died. And she was kind of known for some of the chick flicks. I know she did You've Got Mail, but she took all of the extra info that Henry Hill was so forthcoming with, and she kind of adapted that into a screenplay, which turned out to be My Blue Heaven. And one of my favorite memories was on the 20-year anniversary, or 25-year anniversary of Goodfellas, there was a screening to close out the Tribeca Film Festival, which I went to and sat really close up front, and it was a surreal experience because everybody except Joe Pesci was there. De Niro, Scorsese, Henry Hill, Lorraine Bracco, all of them were there, and so was Nicholas Pileggi. And after it was done, I grew a set of balls and I went over to Nicholas Pileggi and I asked him about the My Blue Heaven connection, and he kind of looked at me and he was like, wow, most people don't know that. And he was pretty impressed. So that was my little brush with greatness that day. But yeah, so at the end of the day, it basically comes down to My Blue Heaven was adapted after all of Henry Hill's stories.
Right. But so I kind of went down a rabbit hole today and was doing some research about this whole thing because I was fascinated by this. And Henry Hill said in one of his books that when he saw My Blue Heaven, he was kind of pissed because Nora Ephron took some of his stories, but she also based the My Blue Heaven screenplay on apparently some other guy named Michael Frances, who was an informant. And, you know, there's also a lot of just pure fiction that Nora Ephron created because she was a fiction writer. But I was really like going down a rabbit hole today of what Henry Hill's life was like. when he was in witness protection. And there's a lot of stuff in there that is really dark and terrible and tragic and not comedic. So I think it's not entirely accurate to say that Steve Martin's character, Vinnie Antonelli, is basically Henry Hill. I think that would be a stretch, but there are a couple of elements of Henry Hill's story that do work their way into this. So it's not an exact Goodfellas sequel, but, you know, they're kind of spiritually related. Also, My Blue Heaven came out a month before Goodfellas.
Crazy.
Yeah, that is interesting. And in case you haven't seen My Blue Heaven, this movie is about Vincent Antonelli, played by Steve Martin. He's a mafia informant who enters the witness protection program, and he moves to a suburb of San Diego. His FBI handler, Barney Coopersmith, who's played by Rick Moranis, is trying to keep Vinny out of trouble until he can testify in court. But all the meantime, the small town's district attorney, Hannah Stubbs, played by Joan Cusack, is trying to bust Vinny for all the crimes he's doing because Vinny can't stop committing crimes. Vinny tries to ditch Barney, but the two of them actually become friends and they learn a little bit from each other, wouldn't you know it?
Aww.
Sweet.
It is sweet. It's a tale of friendship. And this was an August release. It wasn't a big hit, right?
No, and generally the rule of thumb is August and January are kind of dumping grounds for movies that aren't really going to do that well. There's always a couple surprises, but this film opened at number 4 with $6.2 million, which is basically the same opening as Goodfellas. And Goodfellas went on to only make $48 million. This one made $29 million. And I think that at this time, there wasn't a huge interest in a mob film. The two of these together barely made $75 million.
To me, I think the draw of My Blue Heaven is Rick Moranis and Steve Martin. This is the third movie that they've done together. Do you know the other two, James?
Steve Martin had no part in Ghostbusters, did he?
Nope.
I've never seen Stripes, which seems to have every old actor like this. No, okay.
No, I'll give you a hint. We've reviewed one of them.
No, I was going to say Spaceballs. Oh, was he in Honey, I Shrunk the Kid? I'm trying to think of what Rick Moranis was in. That's easier.
You are letting me down right now, James. I got to tell you.
I mean, I remember reviewing all these films, but no, which one is it?
It's a movie that stars Steve Martin, and he might say my catchphrase in this movie.
As a father? Oh, yes. Is Father of the Bride?
Nope, we haven't reviewed that one yet, and Rick Moranis isn't in that.
No, it's Martin Short. Wrong Canadian.
It's kind of big.
Parenthood.
Sure is, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so Parenthood and Little Shop of Horrors, which we haven't reviewed yet. My wife Courtney called dibs on that one when we get around to it. But in both of those movies, Steve Martin and Rick Moranis only have like a scene or two, maybe 3 together. In this movie, they interact a lot. And one thing we've discovered over the course of this podcast, I mean, yeah, Alan hates voiceover. But another thing we found out is that Alan and James love Rick Moranis. And I'm going to be honest, I was really excited to watch this movie just because we haven't watched a Rick Moranis movie in a while. And I was just happy to pop this in the DVD player.
You know, there's one thing about the casting of this film. Did you know that these two guys were not originally cast to be Vinny and Barney?
I did know that because I was doing some research today as well. Originally, Steve Martin was going to be Barney Coopersmith, and the role of Vincent Antonelli was going to be played by Arnold Schwarzenegger. That's crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure they would have had to change some things from, he would have been more the muscle in the mafia. I don't think he would pull off an Italian accent.
Yeah, I mean, the name for starters, right? Like, you can't have Arnold Schwarzenegger play a guy named Vincent Antonelli.
No, or they would just make it, some other kind of mob. But also, John Travolta was considered, but then he wound up doing, I think, one of the Look Who's Talking films. Arnold wound up passing because he wound up doing Kindergarten Cop, so that did well. Rick Moranis, he wound up being put into this film, but it seems like a perfect role. I mean, the guy's name is literally Barney Coopersmith. I mean, when you think of what actor in the 80s plays a guy named Barney, the film was released in 1990, but I mean, there's no one other than, Rick Moranis that could play this in my mind. So it's perfect casting for him. And Steve Martin, this is probably the only film I can ever recall where he does not have his signature white hair.
Ooh. He didn't have it in Little Shop of Horrors either. His hair is dark then.
Yeah, black hair.
I think Leap of Faith he might dye his hair when he's one of those evangelical circus tent preachers.
I don't remember that one. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. But yeah, I mean, you're seeing Steve Martin in a rare form, and you could just tell Steve Martin is having a lot of fun with this character. It's not exactly the same accent, but it's a little bit like his Wild and Crazy Guys character from Saturday Night Live, whereas that was a little more Eastern European. This is an obviously over-the-top, A-yo-A kind of, like an SNL version of a mafia guy. That's what he's doing the entire film.
Right. And the movie starts off with Vinny and his wife. They arrive in suburban San Diego and they're totally fish out of water. They hate it there because they're New Yorkers. You know, looking at it through the lens of, wait, I thought this was Henry and Karen Hill. It kind of doesn't work because Henry and Karen Hill lived in the suburbs. But again, this is not Henry and Karen Hill. It's Mr. and Mrs. Antonelli or Todd and Terry Wilkinson, which is their fake names. And it sort of is kind of reminiscent of that Simpsons episode when they joined the witness protection program to escape from Sideshow Bob, and Homer can't figure out that their last name is Thompson because the Antonellis can't figure out that they're Todd and Terry. The wife thinks that Vinny is supposed to be Terry, and Barney is like, no, you're Terry. They're very confused. Barney asks them for their social security number so they can get the payment. And Vinny has no idea what his social security number is. And he just starts rattling off random numbers until he like gives one number too many. And then he's like, oh yeah, just take off the 5.
Just like that scene in Goodfellas that we reviewed last week, that when Henry Hill is talking at the end of the film, he says that I had my birth certificate and someday I'll have my death certificate. Other than that, you would never know that I ever existed. So it totally makes sense that he really has no idea about his social security number. I only know it because I started filling it out starting in, SATs or whatever, and you fill it out a million times with the college applications and eventually you know it. But there's no way you're going to memorize that 9-digit number, for nothing.
Well, and I feel like it just speaks to who he is as a person. There's nothing legit about him. I mean, we need our social security numbers to get documents and just get paid and all kinds of stuff. And he has no idea because nothing he does is legit.
And he does things that no one else does. We meet his FBI handler, Barney Coopersmith, Rick Moranis, and he tips him. And Barney's like, you don't tip FBI guys. And he goes, I tip everybody. This guy, as opposed to Henry Hill, Vinny's a very charming and likable guy.
Yes, he's got a heart of gold, but the whole life in the suburbs thing doesn't work for his wife. And basically, as soon as Barney leaves, she splits. She only showed up there so that he would get the bigger house and the extra allowance, which I guess was nice, but she has zero interest in staying. And she walks out the door right after that. And Vinny, aka Todd, tries to get acclimated to his new life in the suburbs. And when he goes to the supermarket, like the jokes in that scene are very simple, but it cracks me up to no end. Like when he walks in and there's a guy who's like, oh, would you like a sample? He's like, what do you think? And someone says, have a nice day. And he's like, fuck you. Like, this is not like highbrow comedy at all, but it works really just because of Steve Martin's delivery. He carries it.
There's a part where he's now stolen a price gun and he's labeled every steak like 39 cents. And this cashier guy, he's scanning like 50 steaks and the entire thing comes up as like $12. And just as he walks out, the manager's like, excuse me, sir. And he has this look in his eyes like, all right, I'm going to jail now. And he turns around and they just want to give him a survey. He has no idea what's going on, how these people can be this stupid and naive.
It's just wholesome. The whole thing is wholesome when he's at the supermarket and he's scamming them for all these steaks, and the cashier is like this wide-eyed, bushy-tailed kid, and he goes, wow, 100! Like he's never seen a $100 bill before in his life. And then when the manager stops him and says, we just wanted to give you a survey. Is there anything you couldn't find? And Steve Martin, of course, arugula. Arugula? It's a vegetable. I mean, it's a very quotable movie. That's
Yes.
definitely up there.
Yes. Is that a thing that mafia guys love arugula?
I don't know. I love arugula. It's so peppery and delicious.
Oh, I've got nothing against arugula. It's just like random, but again, it works because of Steve Martin.
And it's also how he draws out the word. It's arugula. It's a vegetable.
Right.
Yes.
I think that's what they got. They wanted to find a funny sounding vegetable.
Yeah.
But shortly after this, he commits more crimes and he's arrested. And that's when we first meet the district attorney of this small town, Hannah Stubbs, played by Joan Cusack. And she's arrested him. He's done a number of little petty crimes and theft, and they found a number of things in his trunk. He was trying to say that it was his own car, that he was borrowing from a friend, but he couldn't find the keys, so he had to jump the car. And the DA's like, yeah, but it was the minister's car. And he's like, you sure he's a minister for $2? I know a guy that can make you a minister. He's very funny in this interrogation.
He says, some guys will steal your wallet, but these guys steal your heart.
It's so funny.
It's so great. But then Barney shows up and is there to just pull Vinny out of jail because he's in the witness protection program. He's got to testify in these high profile trials and he just can't be arrested. So that pisses off Hannah because she wants to book this guy who's a criminal in this small town. But there's really nothing she could do. Barney, by the way, is a super jerk to her, like right out of the gate. He's really nasty when he doesn't need to be. But on the way out, Vinny grabs a mint from the, main reception desk. Police stations don't have reception desks. I don't know.
Booking, who knows?
Yeah, whatever. But Vinny grabs this mint, and that's where Hannah draws her line in the sand, and she says, you spit that out. Because the deputy was like, oh, that was my last mint.
Right. So then Hannah tells him to spit it out right now, and she puts her hand out, and she really wants him to spit it out, which she does.
Just the look on her face,
Yeah,
like
she's so
pissed. But it's not even just that she's pissed. While she's holding her hand by his mouth and her hand is shaking, you can see it in her face that she realizes it's a terrible idea because now he has to spit a mint into her hand, and she kind of regrets it, but she's not backing down. It's just a few seconds, but I think Joan Cusack just nails that scene.
Yeah, you're right. She just looks so pissed.
Yes.
Yeah.
And there's a great part right when Vinny is sprung by Barney, and he gets one last dig at Hannah, and he asks her, have you ever been wrong about anything in your life? And she says, yeah, once. And we later realize that she's referring probably to her ex-husband. But he says, it's your shoes, right? And you see she is wearing these horrible shoes. Like, the wardrobe person was basically tasked to go to a thrift store and buy the worst possible shoes ever.
They're just sensible, ugly, square-toed shoes.
But it's practically like a gray burlap skirt. It's a horrible outfit that she's wearing. I mean, not that I usually notice these things, and I noticed it. So, it was pretty bad.
I mean, you notice it because they draw attention to it.
I guess
But
so.
meanwhile, Barney is having his own problems. His wife leaves him. She is just bored by him. She is like a sports therapist, and one of her clients, who's a pitcher for the Padres, has a bad game and they send him down to the minors and she's going with him. And when she leaves him, she's basically saying how boring he is, that, you get your hair cut on the second Tuesday, you get the oil changed on the fourth Thursday, you have a system for eating pancakes so that the bottom pancake gets as much syrup as the top pancake. I've never been able to crack that. What is that system? I would genuinely use that system.
Yeah, we need to make pancakes and figure it out.
Hold on, James. We're going to pause it. We're going to make pancakes for a couple hours.
What do you mean now, schmuck?
Oh, okay. That's a great line. And then Barney's partner, who is desperate to go undercover, he tries to track down this guy who's stealing credit cards, but it turns out to be Vinny.
Yeah, and Barney is realizing this guy is he can't quit being a crook. There's a great line when they catch him. Barney's partner is like, we got him. And Barney's like, we caught a criminal we already had.
Yeah, and the text on screen, there's these title cards that pop up. Before this scene, they say that everyone goes to the mall, which I thought was a little bit weird because it's definitely not a mall. It's just a regular shopping center. But Barney's there because of this sting, and Vinny's there because he's trying to get these stolen credit cards. And Hannah is also there because she is trying to buy a replacement turtle. She killed her son's turtle while he was going off with his dad, who's played by Daniel Stern. And she's upset because her ex-husband just walked into the house and like doesn't knock or ring the doorbell.
There's no boundary with him.
Right. And I mean, Daniel Stern, as we know from Home Alone, which also came out in 1990, he just goes into houses. If he wants to go into a house, he's going into a house. He's a wet bandit. Actually, and the other wet bandit, Joe Pesci, was in Goodfellas. How about that?
Everything is full circle. Weird.
Right?
Weird.
Yeah, so Hannah killed one of her kids' turtles by accident. Oh, in a garbage disposal.
She was drinking.
Yes, that is true. I mean, that doesn't make it okay to kill a child's pet. But quick sidebar about garbage disposals. Do those stand the test of time? Like, you don't see those very often.
I don't think so. I think they're dangerous.
I feel like they still exist, but there's probably some safety mechanism on them.
For turtles, specifically?
No, my guess is that if you were to like reach your hand down, even like touching any part of the sides, like turns it off. That'd be my guess. Otherwise, they're very frightening.
Yes. Yes. And so Hannah goes to this pet store to get a replacement turtle. And I just love this scene. I even love like before Vinny goes in and he's looking at all the puppies, he says something like, "Oh, these puppies, look how they frolic like this," which is just like a weird turn of phrase, but it's just perfect because it's Steve Martin.
And then he says, "I used to have a dog." And she said, "Yeah, what was his name?" Fangul. He's so quick with the stuff he comes out with.
And as he's talking about a parrot that he once knew, he says, "I once knew a parrot that said, 'You're under arrest.'" And all of a sudden the shopkeeper, it's this older gentleman, and goes, "Oh yeah, is that right?" And Vinny looks at him and immediately recognizes the guy. But Hannah is there, the DA, and she makes her purchase of the baby turtle, and she goes on her way. Right after she leaves the store, the two of them start yelling at each other, like, "You scumbag, you dirty rat." And it turns out that both of these guys, they're snitches to the mafia, and the FBI has placed both of these guys in the same town.
Right. And this actor is named William Hickey. He hasn't done a ton of stuff. He is the voice of the evil scientist in Nightmare Before Christmas. It's a very recognizable voice. I remember that he was on a short-lived sitcom called Baby Talk, which was basically just a Look Who's Talking ripoff, except a TV show version of it. And he was in Christmas Vacation. People might remember him from that. But I just love this guy. His voice is phenomenal. And it's this happy moment for Vinny because he has been feeling alone. And this character's name is Billy. He says, "Oh, you are not alone. You're really not alone." And, you know, we find out why in just a minute. But before we get there, I have to talk about one line that I love because after Vinny leaves the pet store, Barney confronts him and asks him what he's doing and asks him about the credit cards. And he overheard Vinny say to Hannah that his wife had died. And he's like, "What happened to your wife?" And Vinny says, "Oh, she left me." "Oh, when did that happen?" "In October." And Barney says, "Oh, my wife left me in October." And Vinny's like, "What is it about October?" Barney says, "Maybe it's the pressure of Halloween. You never know what to go as."
I love that line.
I quote that line all the time. It's never relevant, but it's just so perfect.
I quote it for different reasons. I quote it because my birthday is exactly 9 months after Halloween, so I always wonder what mom and dad went as that year.
Oh my God.
Whatever, you figured out the math on your conception, so then I had to figure out mine. Either way.
Yeah, my birthday's 9 months after Dad's birthday.
This week, on the test of time, every listener is going to have one moment where they imagine Samantha Noah being conceived for a moment while Alan's parents are wearing costumes. It's inevitable. If you leave that line in there, it's all an image in our head for a second.
We want to know what they went as. But they bonded over it. They bonded over the fact that they both kind of just got dumped.
Yeah.
That was like the beginning of their friendship a little bit. It's kind of like a little nudge in the right, friendly direction.
It's the first non-shop talk.
Right, exactly.
Yes. And then it does pay off the fact that there are these other informants in this San Diego suburb when Vinny goes and meets all of these other guys.
Classic scene. So they go meet up at some diner type of buffet thing. So they go have lunch together, and they're just, as they're walking in, they're introducing themselves as their new names, right? Because everybody has an alias because we're all in the program. It's kind of funny that they would stick them all in the same small town. But they're sitting there eating, and there's some really good throwaway lines. You know, the one guy, Billy, with the voice is, "What the frig is this? A pavlova. It's empty." I mean, they're not used to things like that. They're used to like their garlic and oil and their focaccia bread.
That's like a running gag that the food around there is terrible.
Yeah.
And Vinny goes, there's enough of us to start a crime spree here. And they decide, actually, hey, let's get back to the old ways.
Yeah, they start a crime wave, and they're hijacking trucks and just stealing cargo, intercepting shipments, which is what they were doing in Goodfellas. But while Vinny is leaving like the scene of one of their hijackings, one of the guys says, "Hey, Vinny, don't speed so you don't get pulled over." He speeds. He gets pulled over. He's arrested again by Hannah. And this is the second kind of interrogation that she's asking him about all of the stuff in his trunk. And these two scenes are just like my favorite. I just love them so much. And she's asking him about the swordfish in his trunk. And he kind of explains that away. "Oh, my buddy, his whole life is fishing. And he gave me the fish, but I couldn't take the fish. But unbeknownst to me, he put it in my car. Oh, what about the cassette players? There were all these cassette players that were on their way to Radio Shack. And what about these books?" And he's like, "What do you have against books?" She says, "I have nothing against books." And the book is like how to write your own story. And he says, "I'm going to write my story. I want to write my autobiography." And Hannah says, "Well, why do you need 20 copies of it?" And I love his response, Sam.
Me too. He says, "In case I want to read it more than once." It's just so funny because he's such a wise ass. Like, you can read the same book over and over and over again. It's so funny.
It's great because like he can come up with an excuse for anything, but on that one, he's caught. And he knows it. Like, just the look on his face.
He starts saying how Thanksgiving is very big with the Italians, and he starts talking about turkey cacciatore and places in Italy where Thanksgiving would be. He's very full of shit. Everything he says is just complete nonsense, but it's so funny and so well done that you kind of want to believe him, even though everything he says she's rolling her eyes at.
Yeah, so finally, Barney's able to take Vinny to New York City to testify at his trial. And, Vinny, on the way there, he's so charming even to the flight attendant. She's like, "Oh, I can only serve you one double scotch, sir." And he's like, "Hey, so how about you serve it to me and one to my friend here, but maybe, you accidentally drop it off on my tray instead." And she, "Oh, you, hee hee," and gives him the double drinks.
2 double scotches is $12 on a plane.
That's probably one drink would probably be $12 today.
Right.
But when they land, it's supposed to be this secretive thing that no one's supposed to know he's in town. And there's this entire family waiting for him. And like, "Hey, Vinny." And there's like the mother from Italy, like wearing like this schmata and the old lady. And he's begging Barney, "Please, Barney, I gotta hug my mother once. And please don't let me hug her with handcuffs on." And he totally tugs at his heartstrings, and Barney's like, "Okay, fine." So he hugs his mother, and then the family hugs around him, and it was all a ruse because they were all in on it to allow Vinny to escape.
Right. And it is a very, very funny moment, but that does not stand the test of time because no way would all of those people be admitted to the gate to greet somebody. Nowadays they would have to wait before security at the airport.
It would be the same exact scene, though, but after they got their luggage.
Right. It's more impactful, like as they're walking off the, what do you call it? The jetway?
The tarmac or whatever, right?
Yeah, I don't know.
I call it that accordion thing.
Oh, sure. Mama.
Vincenzo.
Always the most handsome.
It's perfect. Yeah. But then Barney catches up with Vinny at his tailor because Vinny did say, "I've got an appointment with my tailor tomorrow." And Vinny convinces Barney that he needs a makeover too. He gets a new suit. And then that night they're in the hotel room and they're just, going to kill time until the next morning. So Barney orders room service, and Vinny's like, I'm in New York. I want Italian food. And Barney calls up room service and asks what kind of Italian food they have. And they say, oh, and what does that Italian dressing come on? Ooh, salad? Yes, let's take one of those. Oh, but what kind of pasta? Ooh, macaroni and cheese. So, like, this is obviously insulting to an Italian. I did think it was a little bit weird that a hotel in New York City that would have room service would have zero Italian food. That doesn't seem right to me.
It's weird.
Right?
Yeah.
I mean, even though it's not really a nice hotel. But then Vinny starts bunching up the jacket that Barney had just bought. And his reasoning is, you're in your pants and you're not in the jacket. You're wrinkling the pants. You're not wrinkling the jacket. Now they're not going to match. You better take off your pants. Quickly take them off. I'm going to go run to the iron. But once again, he's just trying to lose Barney so he can go out and party while he's in New York.
Oh, and they definitely party. Barney catches up with Vinny at this nightclub. The second Barney shows up, everyone looks at Barney because, he definitely stands out in front of this, wise guy crowd. And he goes, hey, it's Vinny No Pants from San Diego. He basically just says something because Barney's wearing no pants. And he basically pulls Barney aside and he goes, look, if these guys find out we're FBI, then we got a problem here. So Barney actually decides, you know what, fuck it. And he decides, all right, fine, I'll stay out on the town with you. And Vinny approaches these two ladies. And at first, Barney's pretty shy. He's like drinking his, what is it, like a Bloody Mary with the celery in it.
Yeah, he's eating the celery.
Yeah, he's eating the celery. And then finally, these lovely young ladies are finding Vinny charming. And even Barney a little cute. She thinks he's cute. And then Vinny has the great idea that they should dance the merengue. And of course, Barney does not know how to dance.
No, but he figures it out. And I mean, this scene is really, really funny. Just like watching Rick Moranis sort of learn how to do the merengue. It's just brilliant. And this is just more of them bonding. Vinny has a lot to teach Barney. And then the next day is the trial. It's the first of two trials, although we never actually see the second. But Vinny has like a great little monologue here at this trial. Basically, the defense is trying to discredit Vinny and saying that you live in a house and you get all this money and don't you have it easy? And Vinny says, well, I don't get to see my family. I don't get to see my friends. I miss them. And if you want to say that I'm only here because of the deal, well, you're right, but it's still the truth. It's a great moment for him. And on the flight back home, you can see that Barney's starting to loosen up. And when Vinny starts suggesting, hey, maybe you and that DA, maybe you should get along, you could see Barney's like, I don't need to, but maybe. He's starting to think about it a little bit.
Yeah, and actually, Vinny takes the initiative by sending Hannah a couple of baseball tickets. And then Vinny shows up at Hannah's house with a limo and tells the kids, hey, kids, hop in. And he basically coaxes, even, I guess he might even say charms Hannah, even to letting him take her and the kids to the game. Anyone who goes into a limo, you immediately have to touch every single button because, if you're a kid, you have to do it. And I love, there's a great little scene where Vinny, teaches the kid about wallet safety, and because he knows exactly who's gonna pickpocket him, and he demonstrates to the kids. He's like, look, I'm gonna do what we call a bump here, okay? And he pushes the kids together and he steals his own wallet. And it's all in the middle of the Star Spangled Banner. So once he's done with his lesson, he just immediately goes, and the ramparts we walk. There's so many subtle little things in this. But the point of this whole scene is that there was a fifth ticket, and that's Barney's ticket. And it was all set up so that Barney and Hannah could go to the game together and, have some time together.
Right. And it's not just purely out of the goodness of Vinny's heart. He kind of wants to get Hannah off his back and get Barney off of his back. And by pairing them off, he gets two of them off his back at once. Just two other random things about the baseball game. The hot dogs are $1.50, which is just mind blowing. I mean, there's no such thing as $1.50 hot dog at even a minor league stadium.
What would you say they are now?
Now I would think they're, I don't know, $5-6 at least.
Wow.
I think when you get the combo of a Nathan's hot dog, a fries, and one of those Cokes, I think you're paying probably $15.
Wow.
Maybe. I never get those when I go to Citi Field. I mean, obviously not this season, but they have much better food. If you're going to pay a lot for food, I'd rather get something better than just a stupid Nathan's
Shake
hot dog.
Shack.
Shake Shack, you got to wait on the line. But I also noticed you don't see any baseball in this scene. You only see the crowd and you see like the animation on the scoreboard. You don't see any of the players. I assume that was just a licensing thing that they couldn't afford to like pay the MLB rights or whatever. Just something I noticed.
Yeah, no, that's probably what it is. And the important thing about this scene plot-wise is that Barney slips into Hannah that there's some kind of FBI fundraiser ball or something like that. He's like, I don't know, maybe if you're not doing anything, if you maybe want to kind of sort of go with me. And she's like, oh, okay. And then I think this might be my favorite line in the whole film, just because it cracks me up every single time. It's another supermarket scene, and Vinny is walking around, and he sees this bombshell in the frozen food aisle, and he walks right over to her, and he says, it's dangerous for you to be in the frozen food section. And she goes, yeah? Why is that? And he goes, because you could melt all this stuff. And she almost faints for real, and he basically catches her, and which becomes sort of a theme in the film. She is under what can only be a spell, and she's instantly smitten by him, and he winds up taking her to Reno when they get married.
And we should point out that this is Carol Kane.
Miracle Max's wife from Princess Bride.
Mm-hmm.
She's got a very distinct, high-pitched voice. She's been around.
Yes.
She's definitely been around. My go-to for her is Princess Bride.
Yes, and she looks very different in My Blue Heaven versus Princess Bride.
They zhuzh her up a little bit. She's got the boobs. She's got the heels. She kind of looks like she'd belong in New York. She looks like she'd probably be Vinny's type.
Right.
Yeah.
And in doing my research today about how this movie is kind of sort of like Goodfellas, Henry Hill did get married while married to Karen, except it wasn't like in this movie where he's technically married, but the wife is gone. In real life, Henry Hill was living with Karen and their children, and then he had like another wife down the road, and it was this whole tragic, awful, terrible story about what he did to these women. But, in this movie, it's just basically the gag of, don't worry, I didn't marry her under my real name. Which Henry Hill did do and did say. But yeah, and then there is that FBI or law enforcement get together that you mentioned, James, and Barney takes Hannah and they start connecting. Barney asks her to do the merengue, which they do because now Barney's an excellent dancer.
But how did he get the band to play the merengue?
He slipped him a tip, which he learned from Vinny. He's learning all of these moves from Vinny. Sidebar, Barney's partner is just like also doing the merengue, but like on his own throughout this scene.
Well, that I actually have a little bit of background on. I mean, it's silly in the movie. His name is Bill Irwin. That's what he does. He's very much a physical kind of character. He was in Sesame Street for a while. He was Elmo's like sidekick for a little bit. I mean, he's definitely known to move very fluidly. So the fact that he's dancing in this doesn't surprise me because his whole thing is like his fluidity when it comes to his body movements.
I did not know that.
Yes, that's Bill Irwin for you folks.
Okay, like Elmo's human friend?
I want to say Mr. Noodle.
Wait, he's Mr. Noodle?
He might be. There were two of them. Let me look.
Mr. Noodle. He was
Yeah,
Mr.
he's
Noodle.
Mr. Noodle. For a long time, from 1991 to 2010.
Wow.
Yeah, he had a prolific career with the Muppets, so.
That is fascinating. As a father, I watched a lot of Elmo, so I know Mr. Noodle.
I do love the end part of the date when Barney goes to kiss Hannah. And yeah, there is this awkward little scene because Joan Cusack is a very tall woman and Rick Moranis is not a very tall man. And so he feels a little bit intimidated by the fact that she's taller than him, but they happen to be by the steps to her home. And just as they're about to kiss, he just steps up one step. So he's perfectly lined up with her. And it's just very sweet.
It is. And then he does something, I guess, kind of chivalrous the next morning when Hannah's ex-husband, Daniel Stern, comes barging in through the door and Barney throws him out, which is, like a romantic gesture. It did occur to me, though, that the ex doesn't like fumble with the keys. So it appears that the door was just unlocked. Like she should lock the door and he should knock, like they both kind of messed up.
But we see Barney like growing a set. He has the chutzpah to throw him out and say, no, this is not what you're going to do. And he's starting to get feelings for Hannah. He's defending her. He's protecting her and the children. He's manning up a little bit. He's saying, no, you're not going to do this anymore. Get out.
I do love a line he tells Hannah when he's talking about his family, and he goes, yeah, it's always the way with two brothers. There's always a funny one and a serious one. And Hannah goes, you must be the serious one. He goes, no, I'm the funny one. Because, the reason his wife left him, you can only imagine what his brother's like then.
Yes.
But even though Barney's now fallen in love, he finally gets the assignment of his dreams that he had alluded to earlier in the film. He always wanted to go undercover. And he and that partner, the one that danced the merengue, they finally get to go undercover, but Barney's really pissed off because he just finally fell in love. But now he's got to basically sit in a motel for what could be weeks or months, and they're just waiting for some mysterious new buyers in town to contact them because there's some guys in town that want to buy a lot of stolen goods.
And we, the audience, know that that's like Vinny's crew. And when the partner is telling Barney about like, oh, good, we get to be undercover, he says, guess what? You get to be Canadian. And he's like really excited. But obviously, Rick Moranis is famously Canadian.
Yeah, and it winds up that while Barney and his partner are waiting for the call from what turns out to be Vinny, Vinny finds that he doesn't really need to do this buy with these mysterious purchasers because some of his mafia guys, they hijacked the truck, but instead of it being full of like VCRs or something, it turns out it's full of empty water cooler jugs, like those things like the office water cooler, these 20-gallon, what are they, 10-gallon, 20-gallon, whatever,
5
those
gallon.
Huge ones. Oh, right, I remember that from Die Hard 3. Those are 5-gallon
exactly.
bottles. When he sees this truck, everyone's like, oh, we can't do anything with these things. And Vinny goes, when you guys see a problem, I see an opportunity. Because when he talked with the kids earlier at the baseball game, they were talking about how they have this rundown baseball field, and they go, let's do a suburbs scam. And they do a fantastic scam, which is they put these 5-gallon jugs in every store in town with a handwritten note that says, raise money for the Little League, and they are taking in thousands of dollars a week. I mean, it's a fantastic scam.
It's a good idea.
I have second guessed every single one of these things, that one of these little jars that's next to a cash register for years because of this film.
I mean, it's a fair point. Like, how do you know where that money is going? And, Hannah sees it and she immediately suspects that he's stealing this money. She arrests him, and it's a very funny scene where he knows how to do the fingerprints and pose for the mugshot. No one has to tell him. One of the guys at the police station is like trying to help him with the fingerprint. He's like, let me just do it myself. I know what I'm doing.
He's a career criminal, man. He's got it. He knows what's up.
Exactly.
There's no turn to the left, turn to the center. He just knows, all right, you got the frontal shot. All right, you got the profile shot. Good. Let's move on now.
Right.
It's so funny.
But then he makes a deal with Hannah and says, I'm small potatoes. There's buyers in town that want to buy anything that's not nailed down. And for some reason, Hannah and Vinny go to this arrest, which makes no sense at all. But not surprisingly, it's Barney and his partner. And Hannah is furious and she has Vinny arrested. She breaks up with Barney, and Barney is crestfallen. He's devastated. He goes to visit Vinny in jail, and then like you see that the jail cell that Vinny is in is unlocked because apparently Vinny doesn't like using that bathroom, so they let him go to the one in the office, which again is just because he's so charming. He can talk the jailers into letting him sit in an unlocked jail cell.
Yeah, he's very charismatic.
And there's one other thing that Hannah does in her anger. She says, not only am I indicting him, but I'm indicting him under his real name.
Right.
So we now get to Vinny's indictment, and Hannah's like, the government wants you to believe that this guy is above the law. He can't possibly be arrested because if we indict him under his name, he's such a big guy that these cartoonish hitmen from New York are going to be sent to the courtroom to shoot him. And just as she's narrating this, exactly what she says, two cartoonish looking, straight from Central Casting hitmen appear in the, I guess you call it the galley of the court, the second floor.
Sure.
And they're about to fire, but that cop that we had seen earlier, the one that Vinny had taken the last mint from, she sees the gun and warns everyone. Everyone takes cover, and the mob guys, they miss their target.
And these guys had showed up before in New York while Barney and Vinny were like out partying, and Barney was able to, shoot at them, not hit them. They escape, but, he saves Vinny's life.
And there's a great line there. Do you remember that line? He goes, "We're in each other's debt forever. That's great."
Right, because they saved each other's lives. And then later when Barney and Vinny are talking in the open jail cell, Vinny says that he could never touch a gun. He never fired a gun. It condemned him to middle management because he wasn't able to shoot. Also, by the way, the fact that these hitmen show up like at a courthouse.
Yeah, that's bold.
I mean, that is really bold.
That's really bold.
I mean, I get that they want to kill the guy, but that just seems like a bad place to do it where there's going to be a million cops.
Yeah.
And it might be a good place to do it too, because what if they get Vinny on the stand and he starts saying stuff, on the record? That's a bad time to have someone testifying under oath.
Yeah, but he wasn't testifying about the mob stuff then. This was when he was arrested for the stealing of the pennies from the community.
Yeah, but his whole argument is that he would say, "Hey, look, you can't arrest me here because I'm trying to, talk about the Gambino family." That's not something you want on the record. So, yes, while I agree it would probably be better to get him when he's not in jail, Hannah indicted him under his own name, and he's in jail, and he's now in court. This really might be the last time that they can actually whack him.
Oh, because it'll be worse once he's in jail?
I mean, if they put him in protective custody in jail, I mean, I guess, today we know that being in protective custody is not the safest thing in jail. But the reality is that in most circumstances, if you're in protective custody, it's going to be a little harder to kill him. So they try to kill him, but it doesn't work.
Didn't Henry Hill have one of those lines too in Goodfellas? He says to Karen, they can whack me inside as easily as they can outside. So
yes,
kind of like a full circle thing.
Yes.
Yeah, that's probably true. If you're about to turn on the cartel or the mafia, you're probably not going to be protected much by being in custody in jail. So yeah, maybe they should have just waited till one of their guys on the inside could strangle him in the shower or something.
And then call it suicide, just saying.
Yeah. So Vinny escapes the jail with that cop who he stole the mint from earlier, and she says, "Here, take my gun, take my car, take me." And he's like, okay, they have a passionate kiss, and she's like, "Oh, just pretend I'm your hostage."
And then she lies down on his shoulder.
Right, yeah, she's clearly not against her will. But Vinny drives to this lot where he is in fact building a new Little League stadium, which was what he was supposedly raising money for. It seems like he really had been raising money for it. And Hannah's like, "No, you just arranged all of this from jail." We do see earlier that when Barney and Vinny are talking in jail, Vinny says, "I want my phone call. I'm going to make my phone call." So maybe he really did arrange it from jail. It's not ever specified. It's pretty heavily implied that that's what he does. But he is offended when Hannah says that this wasn't his plan from the beginning. And he starts telling his story about his uncle Alfresco, which is a great fake name. But then in the middle of his story, the mafia guys show up and they're going to kill him. But Vinny, who said he never held a gun before, does know his way around a gun. He grabs a gun and shoots the guys, and they're tackled by the cops. And Barney's like, "But I thought you said," and Vinny's like, yeah,
I lied.
Exactly. And he goes on with his story about Uncle Alfresco, which, by the way, horrible story that he found his uncle dead when he wanted a bicycle for Christmas.
It is a funny story.
Yes.
I just love how he doesn't only shoot the gun, he is the greatest marksman in history because he shoots both guys' guns out of their hands without hurting them. I mean, that is like, Clint Eastwood, the man without a name kind of gunsmanship. But gunsmanship, is that a word?
I think you just made one.
Yeah. It's not a cromulent word.
Gunsmanship, it makes sense. You know what I'm saying here.
Fine.
But to add on something you said earlier, Al, when Barney was yelling at Vinny in jail, he actually keeps yelling at him like, oh, you never take any responsibility in this jail and you're, treating this like it's nothing. You made me lose Hannah. I'm so pissed at you. Like, I love her. And that's when he says, I'm going to make a phone call. So
right.
He was trying to save himself too, but I think he probably might have been like, I'll do a couple years for this. But I think he actually is like, oh, maybe I'll do a good thing here. I think there was two reasons why he did this. But yes. I do love, did you see what this baseball field is titled with the sign, the future home of, did you see it?
Yeah, the Vincent Antonelli, in quotes, Todd Wilkinson Stadium. So not really lying low if he's supposed to be in the witness protection program, putting his name on a giant Little League stadium.
Yeah. And it all comes down to Hannah. Like, she's too smart to fall for this ruse. And she basically goes, you really expect me to believe this story? And Barney just walks up to her and goes, yeah, I do. He smiles at her as he goes, yeah, Vinny, he told me the whole thing. He wanted to keep it a surprise. There's no proof, and you're never going to win this in trial. So she kind of just, goes, oh, you. And, Vinny is, his lovable con artist, and Hannah and Barney kiss, and we suddenly get to a title card that says 1 year later.
Right. It's opening day of the new stadium, and the kids are all wearing these white suits with the red shirts and the yellow ties. They look like Vinny. Vinny throws out the first pitch from third base to the pitcher, which is not how the first pitch usually goes, from the pitcher to the catcher. It's very, very bizarre. Vinny is now married to the police officer who he ran away with. His first wife and his second wife, Carol Kane, are there. They apparently married the hitmen who were trying to kill Vinny,
right,
which doesn't really make a lot of sense. It's just there as a gag.
It's a convenient ending.
Exactly. Did you notice the name of the baseball team, by the way?
No.
They are the Freiburg Turtles.
Aww.
Because she killed the turtle.
That's a nice little tribute.
I never noticed that before. But yeah, then the movie just ends. It kind of ends somewhat abruptly.
Well, he makes one last insight where he's always talking about how I impress everybody. And then he has got one last good line and he goes, sometimes I even impress myself.
Right. And yeah, he's settled down, but then also like the guys who work at the stadium are selling hot dogs, soda, car stereos, and his mom is there and she tries to bribe an umpire. So it's like, they're still kind of doing some crime, but it's all in good fun and the town is happy and everybody's happy and the end.
Do you recognize his mother, by the way?
No. Who's she?
So she's in a couple of things, one of which you just reviewed. She was the mother in Saturday Night Fever, and she was also in Moonstruck. She's somebody's mother in Moonstruck.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah, you have to look it up, but I have no reason to lie to you, kid.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Well, Sam, our special guest for 2 weeks in a row.
Ooh, VIP.
Really? So tell us, do you think that My Blue Heaven stands the test of time?
I do. I love this movie almost as profoundly as Goodfellas. I think that there's little things that, over time probably don't stand out, like the fact that he does get a limo for the baseball game. I mean, who the hell takes a limo anymore, anywhere, right? A limo is not really a thing that's done. But overall, I think that just the humor is so funny and the comedic timing and Steve Martin and Rick Moranis. I mean, they're really not in too much anymore. Rick Moranis especially, he hasn't done shit. The two of them together just play off each other so well. And I feel like, again, even though it's a little bit outdated in terms of just the overall feel of it, I do think that it does stand the test of time just based on the humor and the fact that the acting is just so great and the jokes are so well written. I mean, I could not see this movie in 10, 15 years, and then once I watch it, I'm laughing over the same stuff. Yes, it does stand the test of time.
Very good. James, what are your thoughts?
I think this film is really underrated because nobody really talks about this film. It's not very well known, and I think that's a real shame. I think the story is very cute. The acting is hysterical, but something I never really appreciated is, props to Nora Ephron, this screenplay is fantastic. And unless these guys were improvising a lot of these lines, there are so many quotable lines in this, and they're very, very funny. You know, I've tried reimagining this with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It would be completely different, but I could see Steve Martin being Barney Coopersmith. But, you know, that would just be a completely different film. That would be about, you're strong and I'm weak, as opposed to you're a tough guy and I'm like, a wimpy guy. But just the way this film is, it's lighthearted humor. It's got mild violence. I think this is the kind of thing that if the kids know about, like, cartoon henchmen, it's probably even big enough for them to watch. You know, would you even say your son would be able to watch this?
Yeah, I mean, they say fuck a couple of times, but yeah, I think it would be fine.
Yeah, I don't think Goodfellas would be good for him to watch at this age, but
Right.
this film, it's a tight film. It's not too long. It's comedic. I'll bet you that they cut a lot of stuff out for good reason, just because almost all the stuff here is gold. So, you know, I love the minor people. That old guy you mentioned, you dirty rat. He's really funny, and yeah, for me, this film does stand the test of time and should be a better known film.
I agree. I feel like it is so underrated, and people who know it just start quoting it immediately with the arugula and you're gonna melt all the stuff and you dirty rat. But I feel like not enough people know about it, and it's a shame.
Well, we're letting people know about it.
We're doing our duty. We're doing our due diligence.
Yes.
We're doing our due diligence, but in order to do that, while we have a complete podcast, just you and me, Sam, let's also ask Al what he thinks. Al, does My Blue Heaven stand the test of time?
What do you think, Alan?
I was very, very excited to watch this movie again, and I did not stop cracking up the whole entire time. Like, I just love everything about it. I love the little gags in there where Vinny keeps saying, on account of, just like that's a thing he does. I love the way that Barney keeps trying to get out of his car, but he keeps forgetting to unbuckle his seatbelt. Like, just little details like that I really appreciate. Yes, it is super quotable. Pressure Halloween, you never know what to go as. That will never get old.
Right.
Ever, 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 ever. I guess one thing I noted in terms of standing the test of time is that they hijacked cassette players that were on their way to Radio Shack, and the books were on their way to B. Dalton. Like, okay, those are names that I haven't heard very often. Like we were talking about, like the prices of the double scotches and the hot dogs and things like that. Oh, actually, one thing that definitely doesn't stand the test of time is that, having recently been to San Diego, that was actually our last trip before the pandemic started. San Diego has a foodie scene. Like, they have really good food in San Diego now. And yes, I get it that they're in the suburbs, but if these guys wanted really good food, they could find it. Like, it would not be that hard. But honestly, those are, silly little details. This movie is phenomenal. I love it dearly. I had a smile on my face the entire time I was watching it. Yes, of course, My Blue Heaven stands the test of time.
So great.
So great.
Do you recognize one of her sons, too? There's Tommy and Jamie, and one of them grew up to be in a lot of stuff. His name escapes me, but he was in Swim Fan. I think it's Jesse Bradford. Yeah. He's been in a whole bunch of stuff. The other kid, I don't think did much, but Jesse Bradford definitely had done some things after.
Swim Fan. I've heard of that.
It wasn't great.
Oh, and I just pulled up his IMDb. He's in Bring It On as well.
Oh, okay. He did some stuff after. It wasn't like he, was completely unknown after the fact, but the other kid, I don't think ever did anything. And I do like the fact that Daniel Stern was the dad. I think, to me, he'll always be Kevin Arnold's voice.
Yes, yes.
But, yeah, that was good casting.
Well, Sam, thank you for coming on to talk about two of your favorite movies.
Oh my God, I'm so excited. Thank you for having me. Let me know when I can come back.
Of course, you're welcome to come back. We'll have to think of something else to have you back on the show for.
I know, this was like the epitome of everything. It was Goodfellas and then My Blue Heaven. But I'm so excited that I got to do this, and thank you guys so much.
No problem. Thank you for coming on. That's going to do it for us this week. Next week, we're going to be talking about another movie that I am also really, really excited to rewatch, Bill and Ted's Excellent Adventure. Don't worry, the following week we will do Bill and Ted's Bogus Journey in anticipation of the long-awaited Bill and Ted Face the Music hitting video on demand. So I cannot wait to talk about this movie. I am very, very excited.
Oh yeah, it's going to be excellent.
Yes, indeed. So, of course, as always, talk to us at Test of Time Pod on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Send us an email, thetestoftimepodcast@gmail.com. Write us a review on Apple Podcasts. Come on, people. You're sitting around in quarantine. You have nothing better to do. Go on Apple Podcasts and write us a review. I'll read it on the air. And we'll see you next time, everybody. Goodbye.
Bye.